Well, let's talk more about this now with Advocate Paul Hoffman, Director at Accountability Now. A very good evening to you, Advocate Hoffman. Good to have your time. So is it time for Parliament to indeed step in now and summon André to expand on the allegations he made in that TV interview?
Yes, well, certainly Parliament can hold the CEO of Eskom to account. Whether the ex-CEO of Eskom should be held to account is perhaps a bit more questionable. But the nature of the allegations that is exercising the politicians is that the allegations of criminality and of knowledge of criminality in high places have been made in that departure interview that Ruyter gave to your colleagues at ENCA. Now, the correct body to investigate criminal activity, and corruption is a criminal activity, would be the Hawks, the investigating directorate of the National Prosecuting Authority, and, of course, the prosecutors themselves. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not only Ruyter who has been talking about corruption at Eskom. It's also the Zondo Commission, which named, so I'm told, 45 persons connected to Eskom in its report. Nobody got excited about that when the report was delivered last year. And what we have at the moment is a limping criminal justice administration in which the Hawks are not up to the task of investigating serious corruption. Not even the government seems to think that the Hawks are up to that task. What the government is doing is seeking to recreate the Scorpions by making the investigating directorate of the NPA into a permanent body. That is not going to work. Look what happened to the Scorpions. If you recreate the Scorpions, you leave them just as vulnerable to closure as the Scorpions were. So there is clearly a lack of political will to deal with corruption. Mm-hmm. And you can talk about it in Parliament as much as you like. Parliament does not have the power to investigate for the purpose of criminal prosecutions. Right. That work is the work of the Hawks, and the prosecution is the work of the National Prosecutors.
So it's not unusual in South Africa, sadly, Advocate Hoffman, to hear of allegations of corruption and political interference, especially at a state-owned entity, be it SAA, be it Eskom, as we're now dealing with at the moment. But the management at Eskom, including André and the previous board and the current one that has just taken over as of late last year, they've already appeared before the relevant portfolio committees. Should he not have brought this information to their attention? Because even though they're not able to deal with it at a criminal investigation level, surely it's information that should have been put before MPs as part of their oversight role.
Well, I think that if the MPs took the trouble to read the Zondo Commission report, they could ask for elucidation when Eskom appears before Parliament. But what Ruyter has done, and I think he's done it out of anger because of the way that the Hawks treated him in relation to his poisoning incident. I see in the weekend press that some of your colleagues in the media doubt that he was actually poisoned, but I accept, for the purposes of what I'm about to say, that he was actually the victim of an assassination attempt. And what happened to him was that two Keystone cops came around and asked him about his sinus rather than his cyanide poisoning. And that is either an indication of the complete incompetence of the Hawks or an indication that somebody was playing games with Mr. Ruyter. Either way, it's enough to raise his ire. He's now given his interview, and I suspect that he's left the country. I see reports that he has. If I was him, I would leave the country, because if it is true that somebody tried to poison him, then the failure of the poison attempt may lead to other attempts on his life. So I do not expect him to hang around here waiting for somebody to take him out.
How helpful, though, is the information, the allegations from that interview without names of people, be it the name of the minister to whom he reported the alleged involvement of senior 2 cabinet members, in fact, in crime at Eskom? How helpful is any of this when we don't have a name? How do you investigate an unnamed person?
Yes, no, I accept that, and if it comes to pass that the NPA get round to dealing with the 45 persons named in the report of the Zondo Commission, it may well come out that, look, we know from vast experience that the ANC has used Eskom as its piggy bank. The Hitachi Power Africa deal was a deal to enrich the ANC. Professor William Gumede has said that the ANC made 5 billion rand out of that. There is no other political party in South Africa that can raise funds in that way, because no other political party has the gall to steal public money at that rate. Now, the ANC should be accounting to the nation for that 5 billion that it made through going into partnership with Hitachi in a manner that cannot ever be countenanced in any country in which the rule of law is in place. Hitachi has been fined millions of dollars in America for contravening the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act by getting into bed with the ANC. The ANC carries on with complete impunity. Nobody in the Hawks, nobody in the NPA is the least bit interested in investigating the ANC for its involvement as a shareholder in the Hitachi Power deal. So really, do we expect any better now?
So just on the ANC, in the last few days, in the days after that interview, in fact, the party has done 2 things. It has condemned André Ruyter for coming forward with this information in this way, denied knowledge of it. And the other part is that the party has basically said that if indeed this is true, it's an issue of individuals who are corrupt rather than the organization. How do we make sense of that when you consider how recurring allegations of corruption against the most senior leaders in the movement have become in recent years?
Yes, no, a lot of what has come out of Lutuli House since the De Ruyter interview is plain disinformation, the kind of lies that Joseph Goebbels would have been very proud of. The truth is that the ANC itself cannot escape from the fact that it was part of the Hitachi Power Africa deal, and it cannot escape from the fact that the Eskom has just gone backwards in the time that the ANC has been in government. And Mr. De Ruyter has given an explanation for that. The ANC has a better explanation. Let them tell the public what it is.
Is it fair to say also, Advocate Hoffman, that 2 things can be true? André Ruyter can be the CEO who failed to get a handle on load shedding and saw it worsen to levels that we have not seen in previous years, and also that it's quite possible that he may be telling the truth on the aspect of corruption and political interference.
Yes, well, you cannot possibly successfully turn Eskom around while it is being sabotaged by contractors who want everything to break down so that they can get more work, or by thieves who are redirecting the good coal into their export markets while the bad coal or the rocky coal is put into the boilers and breaks the system because it is of the wrong quality to burn to create the energy needed to keep the grid on an even keel. So all of that is certainly something that needs to be addressed. And Mr. De Ruyter was put in as the CEO of Eskom. He was not made the Commissioner of Police, nor was he made the National Director of Public Prosecutions. the job of combating crime is that of the police, and the job of prosecuting criminals on the basis of the information that the police find is that of the National Prosecuting Authority. Mr. Ruyter is not a policeman, and the fingers should be pointing at the lax attitude of the National Prosecuting Authority and the Hawks. Nothing has been done about the Hitachi Power Africa deal, which happened back in the noughties, and it's simply encouragement of a culture of impunity in South Africa, where if you are politically well connected, or if you are stealing in order to raise funds for the ANC, you are treated as royal game, and nobody, but nobody, is allowed to lift a finger against. The fact that Mr. Ruyter has pointed this out is not news at all.
Finally, then, on the issue of Parliament's role, perhaps, possibly, in dealing with these revelations today, the Rapport newspaper and the City Press, so basically Media 24, saying that former CEO André Ruyter basically informed the Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan, about suspected involvement of two of his cabinet colleagues in crime at Eskom. That's according, they say, to an investigation. Two sources they've spoken to who are familiar with a private investigation into the Mpumalanga coal cartels. Now, we don't know if that conversation has happened for sure. It's all alleged to have happened at this point. But is it time then for Parliament to call Pravin Gordhan to account?
Now, what Parliament should be doing where there is endemic and systemic corruption in the system, and what's going on at Eskom is but the tip of the iceberg. What it should be doing is holding the executive branch of government to account to implement the decision that was made in March 2011 by the Constitutional Court in the Glenister litigation, in which that court laid down the criteria applicable for effective and efficient anti-corruption machinery of state. Parliament has to pass the legislation that is required. It is very clear that the legislation that was passed that gave birth to the Hawks in their third incarnation is not working. It's very clear that the levels of corruption are ever rising in South Africa, and Parliament's job is to hold the executive to account, to put the implementation of the law which binds the executive, the criteria in the Glenister case in place, and to pass fresh legislation that better addresses those criteria than the legislation that is currently in place. They're not prepared to do that. The courts are going to have to help them.
Advocate Paul Hoffman, good to speak to you as always. Thank you for your time this Sunday evening.